has it really been 3 years since then? After that day, I trained so hard I went bald. I became so powerful no one can beat me. I'm the hero I'd always dreamed of becoming. So what is this? What's wrong with me? Why does my heart feel so lifeless and empty? Having overwhelming strength is pretty boring, actually. As the days pass, my emotions grow more distant. In exchange for power, maybe I've lost something that's essential for being human.
The worst thing that can happen to you is getting everything you wanted. Everybody wants to win. The grind, the hustle, the 5-year plan taped to the bathroom mirror, different packaging, same fantasy. Get to the top, crush the goal, and then, finally, you'll feel complete. That's the contract you signed with yourself at 19, maybe earlier. Suffer now, cash in later. Delayed gratification. The whole internet is built on selling you that promise. So here's a question nobody making motivational content wants you to ask. Has anyone who actually arrived ever confirmed the payoff? Because the postcards from the top of the mountain don't read like victory laps. They read more like, I'm here, it's quiet, there's nothing else up here. Now what? Tolstoy, the man who had fame, money, family, literary immortality, the kind of legacy most creators would trade a lung for, hit that wall so hard he spent an entire book trying to explain why achievement made him want to stop existing. Not at rock bottom, at the summit. Turns out the view from the top was unbearable. And if you think that's a luxury complaint, a rich person problem that doesn't apply to your regular life, you're not paying attention to what's already happening inside your own chest. Nobody told you the finish line was a wall. That promotion you chased for 4 years, you got it. Corner office, new title, the salary bump you rehearsed negotiating in the shower 100 times. And 3 weeks in, you're sitting at that desk at 6 p.m. on a Thursday, staring at a wall, and the only thing echoing inside your skull is, not joy, not relief, just a flat, beige, anticlimactic, like you unwrapped a birthday gift and it was socks. The fitness goal, the body you destroyed yourself for. You hit the number, you see the version in the mirror you'd been chasing for 2 years, and your brain, that ungrateful, insatiable, beautiful disaster of an organ, immediately starts scanning for the next flaw to fix. Already, the goalpost didn't just move, it packed a bag and relocated to a different zip code before you finished celebrating. You know that guy at the gym? In absurd shape, shredded, disciplined, the kind of physique people point at in locker rooms. And he still stares at the mirror with the same dissatisfied squint he had 30 pounds ago? He arrived. He just can't feel it. The brain is wired for pursuit, hardwired. The moment the chase ends, the reward signal drops off a cliff. You spent years building a rocket to reach the moon, and when you finally got there, you discovered the moon doesn't have oxygen. Technically, you made it. Practically, you're suffocating in a place everyone else is jealous of. Your brain doesn't want peace, it wants friction. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, yes, the name is a cardiovascular event for your tongue, but the research earns the effort. Spent decades studying what he called flow. That state where time disappears because you're so locked into a task that everything else drops away. The zone, the sweet spot. His core finding is almost insulting in its simplicity. Flow only fires when the challenge matches your skill level. Too easy, your brain checks out. Too hard, it panics. The magic lives in that narrow band of friction where you're being pushed just hard enough to stay fully engaged. So what happens when nothing pushes you anymore? Your skill kept climbing, the challenges didn't follow. Everything that used to test you, the presentation that gave you chest pains, the negotiation that kept you up at night, the creative work that used to light something behind your eyes, all of it became routine, muscle memory, autopilot. You sleepwalk through tasks that would have had you wired 3 years ago, and the only thing you feel afterward is a vague, low-frequency hum of, that's it? You didn't get dumber. You didn't become ungrateful. Your brain stopped receiving the one signal it needs to generate meaning: resistance. No friction, no flow, no feeling. And now you're mechanically executing a life that looks phenomenal on LinkedIn and tastes like cardboard in your mouth. Worse, you can't complain about it. Because from the outside, you won. Anyone would kill to have your problem. So you smile, nod, say, "Yeah, things are good," and go home to an apartment that feels 3 sizes too quiet for someone who supposedly has it all figured out. You didn't burn out. You arrived. People keep diagnosing this as burnout. Reasonable mistake. The symptoms look identical on a clipboard. Fatigue, apathy, the persistent sense that someone turned the contrast down on your entire existence and forgot to turn it back up. But burnout comes from too much pressure. This comes from not enough. Burnout is an engine overheating. This is an engine idling in a parking lot with a full tank and nowhere to drive. You finished the race. You trained, you bled, you crawled through every setback, and you crossed the line. And now, you're standing on the other side, hands on knees, chest heaving, scanning the horizon for the next course. And there's just asphalt, some traffic cones, a volunteer folding a table. The crowd left 40 minutes ago. That anticlimax is the part nobody films. The grind gets the montage. The struggle gets the highlight reel and the motivational voiceover. But the silence after the victory, the long, gray, shapeless quiet where you're supposed to feel complete and instead you feel like a phone that finished charging and has nothing to run, nobody posts that. Because it doesn't sell, and because saying it out loud makes you sound like an asshole. I got everything I wanted and I feel nothing. Try dropping that at a dinner table where everyone else is still clawing for rent money. Watch how fast the room decides you're insufferable. When discounted eggs are your emotional peak, something cracked. Here's where it gets quietly humiliating. You, the person who conquered the thing, who climbed the mountain everyone else is still staring at from base camp, start finding completely disproportionate joy in the tiniest, dumbest moments. A sale at the grocery store, a really solid sandwich, finding a parking spot on the first try, some random Tuesday where the weather's nice and nothing happens, and somehow that nothing feels better than anything has felt in months. The promotion barely registered in your chest, but walking through the supermarket and finding eggs on sale, something flickered. Something in your ribcage actually moved for half a second, and you stood there in the dairy aisle with a carton of discounted eggs thinking, what happened to me? What happened is your reward circuitry rerouted itself. The big achievements stopped generating signal. Your system is calibrated for a level of intensity that regular wins can't reach anymore. So your brain started scavenging for dopamine in the margins, scraping the bottom of the barrel for anything small enough to slip through the damaged wiring. You started this whole thing for fun. Remember fun? That stupid, unoptimized, strategically useless state where you did things because they felt good, before the goals and the metrics and the 5-year trajectory turned everything into a performance review. You used to do this because it made you feel alive. Now you do it because you forgot how to stop. The hobby became a discipline. The discipline became an identity. And somewhere in that pipeline, the part of you that actually enjoyed the work got optimized out of existence. The applause stopped landing 3 years ago. Someone admires you, tells you you're incredible, lists your accomplishments like they're reading a plaque at a Hall of Fame induction, and you stand there with that polite, flat, well-rehearsed expression, somewhere between a smile and a screensaver, feeling absolutely nothing. You've got someone in your life who genuinely looks up to you, studies your process, talks about you to other people like you're a case study in excellence. Their admiration is real, earnest, the kind of respect you would have given anything for 5 years ago. And now it bounces off you like a tennis ball against concrete. You know the correct emotional response. You know you should feel something, but the receptor that was supposed to catch that signal went dark somewhere between the 3rd time you proved yourself and nobody cared, and the 50th time you exceeded expectations, and the only reward was higher expectations. And the part that scares you, when you actually let yourself think about it, which is rare because you've gotten very efficient at not thinking about it, is that the numbness isn't limited to admiration. The whole spectrum is muted. Joy, anger, excitement, even sadness. Everything comes through like a phone call with terrible reception. You can make out the shape of the emotion, you can't feel the texture. People see composure, calm, mastery. You know what it actually is. You know the face that greets every situation, good, bad, catastrophic, with the same flat, unreactive, okay, is not strength. It's a system that stopped processing input and started faking the output. You killed the game, and the game was the only thing keeping you alive. Schopenhauer looked at the human condition and delivered possibly the most depressing, accurate sentence in the history of philosophy. Life is a pendulum that swings between suffering and boredom. You either hurt because you want something you don't have, or you're bored because you got it. There's no third position on the swing. The wanting was the engine. The gap between where you are and where you wanted to be, that distance you cursed every single day, was generating all the meaning, all the momentum, all the reason to get out of bed and keep pushing. And you closed the gap. You trained until nothing challenged you. You ground through every obstacle, every setback, every person who underestimated you, and you came out the other side so far ahead that looking back feels like staring at a different person's life. You won so completely that there's nothing left to chase. And the engine, deprived of fuel, just went quiet. Not with a bang, not with a dramatic sputter, just a slow fade one afternoon, and it never turned back on. That's the part nobody puts in the motivational videos. The dream has a shelf life. The hustle had an expiration date printed in fonts so small you couldn't read it while you were running. And now you're standing still for the first time in years, and standing still feels worse than any failure you ever experienced. Because failure at least had a direction. Failure pointed somewhere. This points nowhere. Your emptiness isn't deep, it's a costume. Now here's the part where I stop being generous about it. You've been wearing your apathy like it's sophisticated, like the fact that nothing excites you anymore somehow makes you more evolved than the people around you who still get fired up about a new project, a new relationship, a new anything. But that's not enlightenment, that's a shield. You didn't transcend the game, you just got terrified of playing a new one. Because right now, you're the master. You're untouchable. You reach the top and you know exactly how everything works. If you actually let yourself care about something new, something you aren't already good at, you'd have to be a beginner again. You'd have to risk looking stupid. You'd have to risk failing. So you choose the numbness. You tell yourself that nothing matters because it's infinitely safer than admitting you're too scared to start over from zero. The person who calls their own boredom wisdom hasn't outgrown the arena, they're just hiding in the VIP section. Your apathy isn't a superpower, it's a defense mechanism with a premium price tag. And it costs you every relationship that requires vulnerability, every experience that demands showing up without knowing the outcome, every version of yourself that could have existed if you'd had the guts to care about something you couldn't control. And nobody's coming to drag you out. The people who tried already got tired of knocking. The ones still orbiting are running out of ways to reach someone who responds to everything with the emotional bandwidth of a dial tone. You built a fortress out of whatever, and it doesn't matter. And that flat, practiced, one-word response you give to every situation regardless of weight. And now you're shocked that the fortress is empty. Here's what's underneath that, though, if you're willing to look at it without flinching. The flatness you've been living in isn't a final state. It's a waiting room. You sat down in it. And you sat there so long you started decorating, hanging up pictures, calling it maturity or realism, when the actual diagnosis is simpler and more fixable than your ego wants to admit. You're starving. You starved yourself of the one thing your operating system needs to run, something that matters when nobody's clapping and nobody's keeping score. The next move doesn't start with a bigger mountain, another goal, another chase rigged to produce the same crash at the top. It starts with something so small and so pointless that your optimization-addicted brain might physically reject it, doing one thing today for absolutely no strategic reason. Cook something you've never tried. Call someone you've been dodging because the conversation won't be efficient. Walk somewhere without a destination and let yourself be bored in the honest way, the alive way, where your brain actually has to generate its own signal instead of flatlining on autopilot. The people who matter, the 2, maybe 3 humans still in range of your black hole of competence, don't need you to be impressive. They need you present, awake, capable of laughing at something stupid without running it through an internal analysis, capable of being bad at something new without treating it like a threat to your identity. You spent years becoming untouchable, and it worked. Nothing touches you, including the things that were supposed to make the whole grind worth it. So put one thing back on the line. Not everything, just one stupid, inefficient, strategically worthless thing that reminds your nervous system what it feels like to want something you haven't already conquered. That's how the engine restarts. Not with a roar, with a click. If that landed, subscribe. We're here every week, pulling apart the stories you tell yourself so you stop living inside them.